Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. I have my wonderful new friend, Miss Kris, with us today. She is amazing, such an outgoing personality, beautiful smile. She owns her own business, and we're going to talk today a little bit about who she is as a person. It's all about soul hygiene on this channel, but we've never really talked about the foster care system. And I'm pretty excited because Miss Kris is a foster child. And, look at the amazing things that she has done despite having, that setback, I guess, in her earlier years. But I'm excited for her to join Soul Hygiene. I'm going to turn it over to Miss Kris and let her introduce herself. Hello, darling. How are you?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Kris Fleming. I live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I did not grow up in Tennessee. I've been here since 1999, so I've now been here more than half my life. But you're correct, I was technically a teen runaway when I got here. It was a week before my 18th birthday, so I was like, nobody's coming to get me. So I grew up in Northern California where I aged out of the foster care system. Um, my foster homes were not a whole lot better than just being with my mom. I still very much love my biological mom. I've not had contact with her in about 7 years, and that's by my choice. My therapist and I talked a lot about how I could have a healthy relationship with her. And ultimately, we decided that I could not. But I love her and miss her every day. And I'm sure she doesn't know it, but I do little things that help me feel connected with her on a regular basis. And um, yeah, So, what can I share with you about my life?
I absolutely love the fact that you didn't have anything and look at where you are.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so growing up with my mom, I went into the foster care system when I was about 12 or 13. I honestly don't remember exactly. It was a few decades ago. Um, so yeah, it's 3 decades ago, more than 3 decades ago. Um, but yeah, it was kind of a fluke that I was taken to into state custody. My maternal grandfather actually had grown up in the foster care system, and so my mom had told me all these horrible stories about foster care. So I was terrified that anyone would find out what was going on at home and put me in foster care. I was literally terrified. Um, I can say, well, I was told stories about things like the foster parents putting spiders in his oatmeal. That did not happen. I did have good food to eat. There were no spiders in the oatmeal, but definitely some other things happened. So, grew up in pretty extreme poverty. We were often living with other people or living in our car or living in a homeless shelter. Um, Thankfully, Northern California, Sacramento area is pretty good weather for doing such things. So, was in California recently, and the homeless population there is just astounding. But what happened was my mom was dating this man who was quite unwell mentally, and he called the police on her saying that she had assaulted him. Now, whether or not she did, I don't have any idea. But simultaneously, she had actually kicked me out of the house. I was like 12 or 13. And I owned two backpacks. and I filled one with school supplies and put it on my back. And I filled the other one with clothes and hairbrush and toothbrush and such and put it on the front and walked down a couple of miles to the nearest payphone with my turtle self, my front pack and my backpack. And I actually called my youth pastor, and he came and got me, and we spoke to sheriff's deputies about what was going on. And one of the most tragic things that still just really gets under my skin is when law enforcement is transporting a child to a foster home or to a children's home or to their own home to talk to the child's mother about why they don't have a place to live at 12 years old. Do you know where they put that child to transport them? In the back seat behind the cage where they look like a criminal. So here we are in my community, and I've just been kicked out of my mom's house at 12, 13 years old, and everything I own is in two backpacks, and they put me in the back of a police car. So yeah, if anybody's paying attention, stop doing that, please. Stop it. But anyway, so they took me to, we actually were living in an apartment at the time. We were not homeless at the time. They took me to my mom's apartment so they could talk to her. And when they arrived and knocked on the door, the boyfriend came out saying that my mom had assaulted him with a hammer. So I wasn't there. I don't know. Um, but at that moment, they took me to a children's home, which is not like what I expected from watching TV. There were about 80 kids in all, and there was a smaller unit of um, like infants to preschool age children, crawling, walking, people in diapers, humans in diapers. And then girls were situated on one wing, boys were situated on another wing, and then each was broken down into age groups. Um, so another thing that was very startling to me was, you had sibling groups, right? Brothers and sisters, and they didn't get to see each other because boys and girls were separated. A lot of times, all the siblings don't even get to go to the same home. Um, anyway, the children's home, the people there were very kind. They were very loving. There was a school on site at the children's home, so it was I guess what I imagine sort of like homeschooling would be. Everybody had their own curriculum according to their grade level, and we all went to school on site at the children's home. So that was interesting. Everybody had chores to do. Um, Teenage girls could not shave their legs because we weren't allowed to have razors. Um, there was typically two beds and two closets per room. So, you immediately shared rooms. But yeah, for the most part, it was okay. And then I went to my first foster home. Um, my mom found me there. How? I don't know, but she showed up there. And so they had to move me. And on the way to my second foster home, there was some sort of, I was at the first one for a couple of months. It was in a completely different neighborhood than the area of town than one I knew. Um, but on the way to the next foster home, the social worker received a phone call that they were having to move me from the first foster home because the foster dad, who was not even supposed to be living there, was not the foster mom's husband, as she told me, was was actually a convicted felon, if I recall. my 6-year-old foster sister had, there were allegations that he had been improper with her. I have
Wow.
no idea whatever came of that. There's just not, we don't get a lot of information when these things happen. So they were picking me up from that foster home to take me to a second one. And on the way there, um, the social worker received a call. You can't take her there, take her back to the children's home because the same thing happened at the second home. There was an allegation against the foster father. So was back at the children's home for, I don't know, a few weeks, a month. I don't know. I will say too, they really try to make holidays nice. Like I remember that we had a nice Thanksgiving, we had a nice Christmas. I actually was asked, like what do I want for Christmas, um and was given, Christmas gifts that were in line with what I had asked for. So um it was, they really tried to make it as pleasant and homey as possible. Um, but anyway, finally went to my third foster home, which is where I aged out. Um, I had attended 5 different high schools by this point, and I was still in my junior year. So in, 2.5 years, I had attended 5 different high schools from all the moves with my mom and then the children's home and then the foster homes. Um,
Wow.
and at that time, there wasn't a universal or a uniform like curriculum and credit system across all of the school districts. It was like this high school had, you know, these requirements for graduation, and this one had another, and this one had another. And so every time I went to a new high school, the requirements changed.
Mm.
And I realized I was not going to be able to graduate on time. So there was a there was a program um, that was, it was a home study program. I'm trying to remember exactly, independent school. That's what it was. There was an independent school. And so they would hand me, I would go in for an hour and I would take a bunch of tests based on whatever assignments they had given me for the previous week. I'd take the tests and I'd hand in my work, and then they'd give me more work, and I would go home and work on that and come back the next week and do it all again. Right. So I went to school an hour a week, but I was independent study the rest of the time. Well, I really liked that. I actually wound up doing independent study for college, essentially. I always wound up always taking virtual courses and remote courses. And so, anyway, the curriculum was crazy easy. So, it was not designed, it was designed for people who were going to have a very hard time graduating. And um, I was going to have a very hard time graduating, but not for the same reasons. It was just because of being shuffled around so much.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I would do 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And so I managed to catch up and then actually finished early. So I finished high school like 3 weeks before my 17th birthday. So I was 16.
Nice.
Didn't actually graduate till I was 17. There was a ceremony, and that was when I was 17, but I finished when I was 16. So kind of proud of that. Um, yeah, so then when I finished high school, I started working full time. Um, I was doing clerical work and started attending college part time. Like I said, doing that remotely and virtually. And there was a boy. I met a boy, and he lived in Tennessee. Met him online in a chat room. There was a boy, and I basically didn't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
So I bought a one-way plane ticket and peaced out. Said bye, California, and landed in Nashville January 31st, 1999. So a week before my 18th birthday. And I did wind up marrying said boy and having two daughters with him, and then wound up unemployed, homeless, single mom my own self. So that was extra fun. But ultimately, a couple of years after I left California, I never heard from my foster parents again. And a couple of months after a couple of years after I left California, I received word that that foster father had also had allegations made against him by like nine different girls, and he ultimately confessed and went to prison. So 3 out of 3 foster homes were shut down for sexual abuse of the foster children.
I don't want to interrupt your story because I just
No,
love,
please.
but I find that to be common though when I have talked to other people who have been foster kids, and there should just be so much more background checks when it comes to taking in children and being a foster parent. And I know the system is overwhelmed, and so they try to get the kids in homes the best that they can. But just to know that 3 out of the 5 homes, that's that's over 50% of,
3 out of 3.
oh, so
Three out of three.
100% of the home.
100%. Yeah.
That's just unreal to me. I I, I don't know. I wish that there were better laws when it came to foster kids, and especially the kids who have, you get to a certain age and you're out of it. Like, there has to be something to help those kids adjust to adult life when they have no one. Um,
Yeah. And at that time, there wasn't. There were no like scholarship programs to go to college or, I mean, I worked and I paid what I could, and when I couldn't pay for it, I didn't go. Thankfully, I never took out any student loans, mostly because I didn't have a parent to turn
yeah.
in tax returns for. So I
Yeah.
couldn't even qualify for student loans. I didn't have a parent to turn in
Do
anything.
you think that, for me, like I always tell this story, everyone knows like the trauma that I've been through. This is the whole reason for SoulHygiene. And I always say, I don't believe that had to have been part of my life in order to be the person I am now. But I have found blessings and resilience in coming out of that trauma and being the person I am now. What are some of the things that you have found like you're a better person because of being a foster kid?
Certainly, not just the foster care, but, also growing up with my mom, I'm incredibly resourceful. Um, if something needs to get done, I'm the person you want around, because there's no, well, you can't do that. Like we were talking about my sign before we started recording. And so, for the purposes of the audience, I'll tell this story. This is a company that is my flagship company. I now own 4 different businesses. This is my flagship company. And so much of my heart is in KFP Investors. But I wanted to make a sign to be on the wall behind when I'm on Zoom calls and podcasts and things like that. So I wanted to make a sign. And so I went to the craft store. I bought this wood with a frame and I taped it off and I painted it blue. And I found the letters, but there was no O. There was, I couldn't spell KFP Investors. There was no O. So this actually was a Q, and I bought the Q, and my darling husband cut off the leg of the Q for me. And so, really, I kind of chuckle when I see this, because really, I know that it says KFP Investors, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I would just take that as an illustration of, there's no, we can't even spell KFP Investors. And what so many people, I think, women in particular would do is, oh, I've chosen a bad name. I need to change the name. I'm no good at this. I need to just give up. I can't even name the company. We really just snowball when these little things happen. Of course, to us at the time, they're not little things, right? They're very
Right.
important things, but we often have a tendency, I'm not excluded from this, often have a tendency to just focus on what's getting us down. And so I just encourage everyone, yeah, sometimes you have to sit down and have a cry for a minute. I do that too. Um, but I encourage you to not allow the obstacles to best you. Um, be an overcomer, be resilient. And instead of we can't spell investors, it's, well, how can we spell investors? Well, you buy a cue and you cut off the leg.
Right.
Sometimes you have to cut off a leg to make it happen. No, that's not a good quote. Don't don't do that.
That went a bit
Uh,
sideways there.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think that I have become incredibly resourceful and am really good at solving problems because life was just one problem after another, after another, after another, and there was no one coming to help.
Yeah.
If you want to eat today, you have to go figure out how. If
Right.
you want to sleep in a warm, dry place today, you have to go figure out how. And certainly, thank God, my own children, I have three, ultimately had three daughters, and I now have two stepchildren as well. So four daughters and a son. Um, but thankfully, they have not grown up in those circumstances. But I hope I've taught them resourcefulness and resilience anyway, because it is something that I deeply value in myself. So I echo you. While I don't know that I necessarily believe that those things had to happen to me to make me the person that I am, there's still a lot of positive benefit that comes out of that. And just little things like cut the leg off the cue, you know? Um,
I
yeah,
love that you inspire and encourage, coming from like I grew up also very poor, and now I'm the caregivers for my elderly parents. And so you have to find those good things. And sometimes we have to look for them. Otherwise, we'd go mad and we would
yes,
be depressed. And the little things, the little Q and the O would get us down and we wouldn't get back up.
right.
And I always try to encourage people. I'm like, even if things are going bad, look for the good. Because if
Yes,
you look for it, you will find it.
yes,
So I love that you encourage and inspire women because of your background. You're now like, you know, a woman entrepreneur. Like you can encourage and inspire young girls and even young boys to say, hey, I don't have nothing now, but I can be somebody. I can still inspire the world. I can still be something that's going to make a difference and be someone who I'm proud of. And I think your story goes beyond just being a foster child and moving across country. I mean, I did that with three little kids. I was a single mom, and when my their dad left me, I packed them all up and moved to Chicago because I thought I need to do something because I may be a single mom for the rest of my life and I need to have some education,
yeah,
and it worked. I'm now in corporate finance and I've been in finance for over 25 years. But it came down to making a decision that at the time people looked at and said, "What are you doing? You're ruining your life. You're
yes,
never going to make anything of yourself. You have three little
yes.
kids to worry about." And I was like, yeah, that's who I'm worrying about, you know?
Yeah, and we were talking a little while ago too about, you know, statistics indicating failure.
Mhm.
And um and I think for me that was part of it. Like, I never knew my father. I grew up with an unwell mother in extreme poverty and then went to foster homes and then, abuse and on and on and on and on, right? And I went to five different high schools and graduated from the school that had been a little sketchy, but they gave me a diploma.
Yeah,
So, I didn't finish my college education. I'm two classes away from an associate's degree because I went when I could pay. And then ultimately I got to a certain point and I went, who cares anymore? Like all of the life education and experience and work experience that I have overcomes,
right.
I mean, I think I needed to take a biology class and an accounting class. Well, I'm not in biology or accounting, so it doesn't matter. So I was like, you know what? I'm finished with that. Let me focus my time and energy on things that are honestly much more impactful, which is not to discourage anybody from going to school. But let me circle back. I'm taking a very long route to say that I think there's a certain perspective, at least for me, at 17, running away from my foster home to, from California to Tennessee and knowing only one person. I was like, what do I have to lose?
Mhm.
All the statistics say I'm going to be a drug addict, with my own kids in foster care and abused. And like,
Right,
there's, there are no indicators here that say that life is going to go well for me. So I can let that define my future, or I can let that be the stepping point where I decide to be something different.
right.
So yeah, I just, metaphorically went around cutting the legs off of cues to make them O's till it worked out. So there you
Well,
go.
if you haven't heard it in a while, I'm very proud of you.
Oh,
I'm so very proud of you. And I think you're beautiful. Your smile lights up a room. I love your smile. When I see
well,
you
thank
on
you.
Facebook and you take pictures, I'm like, oh, I love your smile. But, you
I
know,
appreciate.
bravery comes in all
Yes.
shapes and sizes, it comes in different categories. Someone else's bravery is not another person's bravery. And some people have to be brave beyond their years when they're first starting life. And I wasn't able to take that step till I was in my 40s. I'm going to be 50 next year and
You look
I
amazing, by the way.
oh
I'm super jealous. I need to understand your skincare routine because a lot of my mother is showing up right around here. So,
I appreciate that. I've been on a heal. I You know what? Let me back up. I know why. Sometimes I look young. I just never got into all the things, bad things that can do to your body.
oh, I did as many as I could get my hands on. I've
But you
stopped.
you are
Yeah.
gorgeous. You are gorgeous.
Thank you.
Um, but my journey has only been 5 years.
Yeah.
But I was the same way. I had to come to a point where it was like, I am not going to be a statistic of abuse. I was on that precipice of ending everything, but I had to switch my mindset and decide I'm not going to be a victim of all these circumstances that have defined me for 25 years. I'm done. I'm done with people, abusing me. I'm not going to do it. And I think that at a very young age, even though those words did not come out your mouth, that was your mindset. You were like, you know what? I'm on my own. I'm going to do life.
Yeah.
And even though we go through things and we have consequences of decisions that we make, that's all part of being brave,
Mhm.
especially when you're a young kid or you're a woman who's gone through abuse. You just have to, you have to define that courageousness within you and decide not to be a victim of whatever has happened. And I love your story because I think so many people in this day and age have that victimized mindset. And you and I have been through so much, and yet we can become victorious over all that has happened to us. And you have companies, you're traveling and going to all these meetings, and soon people will be paying you, I promise, for just you going out there and, you know, giving them the knowledge that you have. So I always look at it like, if we can do that, then we can inspire some of these other people who haven't had as much trauma as we have
Right,
to look within themselves and be like, you don't have to be a victim. You don't even have to
right,
live in this mindset.
right.
How much greater can life be when you become victorious over your thoughts and your emotions?
Yes, yes. Oh, you got me fired up. Um, yeah, I think so I'm doing an interview experiment. It's like 90-second interviews with random strangers that I encounter. And one of the things, the primary question that I ask them is, if you could give your younger self three pieces of advice, work related, business related, life related, it doesn't matter. You could give your younger self three pieces of advice, what would they be? And so, of course, I can't help but reflect on my own answer to that. And my number one answer is, and this is from me, not the compiled data, because I haven't compiled it yet. Um, my number one answer is, I spent so many years looking for someone to love me, to cherish me, for someone to take care of me, because I'd never had that. And and when I finally recognized that I could not expect anyone to love me more than I love myself, that love has to start with the person in the mirror, um, that's when life really began to change. That's when my soul really began to change. And so, for anyone who is listening, who is looking for someone to love them, I just want them to know, you have people in your life that you care about, you have commitments, um, you have goals that you want to meet, but you cannot pour from an empty vessel.
Mm-hmm.
So fill your vessel. Love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, think about the person you want to be and practice becoming that person until you realize one day you're not practicing anymore. You just are that person.
Right.
And that has made all the difference in the world. And I wish that I had not been in my late 30s before I finally started learning to love the person in the mirror. That person who brushes their teeth with you every morning. Start there.
Yeah. And you are so right, because that's one of the first things I had to do, you know, was, and it was so funny because it's once you start doing that, the people around you change.
Yes.
They see, and the people who were in your life before kind of move away because they're not expecting what's coming and are probably not okay with who you're becoming.
Yes. Yes.
And when I started doing that, I met one of my best friends within, I think, 8 months of this mindset switch. And they're one of the reasons I am the person I am, because of the encouragement, because they believed in me, because they inspired me every day to be like, you got this. Don't get down, keep going.
Yes.
And when you have people, even one person who believes in you, it makes all the difference in your world, but that one person can be you. And then watch all of these people start surrounding you who also believe in you. So I love that. And I think that's a good place to end. Otherwise, we could probably talk for another
Hours,
episode.
hours and
But
hours.
yeah, so if someone wants to talk to you, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would love that. So the best way to reach me is Kris, Kris, at KFP Investors, not with a Q, with really an LLC.com. That's also our website, kfpinvestorsllc.com. That's, as I said, my flagship company. I also actually do coaching and consulting, particularly for female entrepreneurs. That's where my passion really is. And so that would be krisfleming.net, KRISF like Frank, LEM like Mary, ING.net. And every time I say that, somebody says, was .com taken? It was. KrisFleming.com was taken. And if you have it, let me know. I want it. Thank you.
That's what happened with Soul Hygiene. I had to take soulhygiene.net because lo and behold, someone had .com, even though it's not even a website on the
How
internet.
dare they try to piggyback on our brilliance
I,
preemptively?
I know. I absolutely
Unnecessary.
adore you, and I hope that you will come back and do another episode with us.
Anytime.
I think we have so much to talk about. We have a lot in common. And so it's just amazing that we were able to get together today. So I thoroughly enjoy you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Soul Hygiene. We'll see you later.